In the upcoming Phantasmal Barrier content, we have one 5-star RGB hero selector, and then all the way in week 4, there's also a fully decked hero selector, which just means that your character will come plus 15. I'll do a separate thing once we get a little bit closer to week 4 about exactly how to min-max your fully decked selector, but it's basically another hero selector just with your character fully maxed out. So let's take a look at the tier list for what you should be taking from your hero selector. First things first, these 2 units are free, so you're not going to be able to get them. A little bit sad, because Setsuka is very, very good. We easily beat S tier. And then these 8 units here are all completely free, so you do not need to pick them from your selectors. I've seen so many tier lists with people saying to pick up these units. Please do not do that. These are all free. You're wasting your selector. So here at the top, we have the S tier, which I just have with Fene and Mort. Fene is such a ridiculously good PvE character. She works for Fire, Dark, Ice Expedition, and she's also okay for Light Expedition. She can solo clear Magnar in Trial of the Constellations on both Nightmare and Perdition difficulty. You can use her pretty much anywhere that needs a DPS, Abyss, Breach, yeah, literally anything. Even if you're a PvP-focused player, she's so good at PvE that she's worth picking up. And then there is Mort, who, if you haven't done your Episode 3 selector yet, if you're a new player, he is available for free in there, so maybe don't pick him up if you're still able to grab him from that. But he is also S tier. Just his ability to shut off counters completely is something that makes him a character that's going to stay around. Like, right now, even like into Setsuka, he still has a decent matchup into her, despite being Earth into Fire. The other anti-counter unit, Astromancer Alana, is complete garbage. She's just a worse version of Mort most of the time. So I think he's definitely a unit that's worth having around. You can use him in RTA and Guild War and Arena offense if you really need to. And then there's the A tier. So these are all like really good units. Roana gets used. She's pretty much mandatory, actually, I think, for Trial of the Constellations against Aquina. That boss just spams so many AoE extra attacks, and Roana is what lets you survive through that whole thing without really thinking about it. You can just auto it. And then her S2 passive has stuck around in PvP as something that is just good against extra attacks / counter attacks. And from her release all the way until now, she's seen pretty good PvP usage, though it goes like up and down depending on what's in the meta. But right now I use her so much in Arena. Setsuka, like Frieren, there's just so many units that are spamming counterattacks or extra attacks that Roana is really, really strong right now, I think, even in PvP. So definitely worth having. And then there's Yoha. Yoha is really, really nice because she synergizes really well with Lady of the Scales. You can put her in the front and you get a free immortality for Yoha, which helps her stay alive. And then her S3, if you're fighting a Lady of the Scales, ignores damage share. So you can just one-shot something through the mitigation passive. I think she's great for Arena and for Guild War. And yeah, just worth having, I think. Paladus, still pretty much the anti-extra attack unit, or the anti-non-attack skill unit. Rather, she procs her S2 whenever somebody does a non-attack. You can stun them all with Crown. Very annoying character to deal with. Still pretty nice for PvP, but I would say mostly RTA only. But then there is Elvira. Elvira, she has her anti-focus thing, though now she kind of has a new role as well, which is Lady of the Scales plus Elvira is basically a cheat code for Guild War. You have this character that just gets immortality for so ridiculously long, and you can save up souls and even just Sovereign S1 into S3 again and get another 3 turns of immortality. It's pretty ridiculous how long Elvira lets you stall out. So she's just so ridiculously good for Guild War, especially if you have Lady of the Scales, and you can use her in Arena too for pretty much the same purpose. Even without that, though, she still has her previous use of just negating Fighting Spirit. Every once in a while, you'll see a defense that just dies if you cut out their Fighting Spirit unit, and she should be a unit that has decent usage in the future just because of her S2 passive. And then there's these units here. Crow is still a pretty good tank. I think in Guild War, mostly, you might be able to get a bit of usage out of him. I don't use him nearly as much as I used to, so I moved him down here. But he still has his Giga Arius, and his S3 is really, really nice. There's also Schneel. Schneel he can solo Banshee if you really need it, but I don't think it's that important. Fearin can pretty much do the same thing, and I don't really value it highly enough to put him any higher. For PvP, use him in RTA against Death Dealer Ray. His usage in RTA is really going to jump up and down depending on how much Death Dealer Ray gets picked. So he's pretty much tied directly to him. But he's good. And then there's Guard Captain Crow. One thing with Guard Captain Crow is I think you kind of really need his artifact to use him. I don't think this character really functions without his artifact, so that could be a consideration. And he's just a defense scaling nuke unit. You soulburn him to just focus one character down. A little bit hard to build, which is also a consideration for newer players. Though his gear is also pretty unique. He doesn't have a lot of competition for his specific gear, I think. And then there is Celine, another anti-non-attack unit, though I think just a bit harder to use because she's pure DPS. Her win rate spikes up and down. I feel like she is very frequently a character that gets picked more than she probably should, leading to her having some not great win rates, but she's still usable in the right spots as long as you're not really overdoing it. She does really, really high damage in the right situation. And then there is Genua. Genua does a ton of damage. His S3 with the full pen is great, but rough because any sort of pen res kind of nerfs his damage really, really badly. I found that right now in Guild War, it's honestly a lot less spots for me to use him than I used to. I think a combination of just pen res and also Lady of the Scales, though there's still a couple of comps where I find myself able to use him, so I think he's not bad or anything. Still a really strong general DPS though, as long as you're able to avoid the things that make him not so great. And then there is Abigail. She gives your backline just one free immortality, which I find myself not using as much as I used to because I just kind of Lady of the Scales everything now, who gives immortality to your frontline slot instead, plus the damage share. But there's still a couple of defenses I see every once in a while where I'll just Abigail plus Kayron and then just send them in or something. So still nice to have around, I think. There's also Humir, who is mostly an RTA unit, though I've used her in Guild War a couple of times. Her thing is, I think it's just not a great time for her because she's definitely a character that does her stuff and then doesn't do anything because it just takes her too long to get her her abilities back up again. But her turn 1 is really, really strong. It's just, it feels like a lot of the matches are pretty drawn out right now. I'm putting her here mostly just because I really believe in her and I like her a lot. I think she's definitely a character that has an insanely strong turn 1. Just the amount of debuffs that she puts out is completely ridiculous. Though her usage isn't super, super high, if she starts getting used more, she might get moved up. She's honestly a lot easier to draft than you would think, but also she prevents you from picking just 5 light units or something, which is another consideration. And then there's Arya. Arya is really just every once in a while in Guild War. I pretty much don't use her at all. Or I stopped using her because I think I tried using her once for the first time in months, and I immediately got stripped by a 300 effectiveness Arunka, so I stopped using her again. But Christy got buffed, so maybe I'll start using her again. Pretty much her main thing was just her being so stat hungry, and then it kind of sucks when you invest all those stats and you get stripped anyways. But the Christy buff should definitely help her out a lot. Mainly just the Guild War unit. I don't think she really has any sort of place in Arena, and then maybe a really niche counter pick in RTA or something. So down here we have the PvE tier, which these characters all have varying levels of use. Fenris is just a really, really strong DPS for primarily Light Expedition, where he's best in slot, Ice Expedition, where he's also best in slot, and I also think he's really good against Trial of the Constellations Aquina, mostly for Nightmare autoing, which isn't a huge prio because you could just manual it, but because he's also good in those 2 expeditions as the best in slot DPS, it's worth to mention that he autos Nightmare, or he is one part of the auto team for Nightmare Aquina, so just really, really strong PvE DPS. And then there's Cecilia, a very versatile debuff knight. And her being a knight is important because a lot of content asks you to have a knight these days. She's great for Earth Expedition, and then besides that, you can use her in Hall of Trials. She works very well in 2 of the 3 rotations. She works really well against Abyssal Euphine, and also against Death Dealer Ray. Charles and Erbelin are somewhat tied together. They are for Trial of the Constellations Aquina, though it's worth noting that the season is going to be ending eventually, so they might not be strong for too long. You might want to consider Grace of Growthing these units if you make it all the way down here. They're just counter units for Aquina, pretty much. There's not too much to say about them. Charles, you can also one-shot Banshee pretty fast. Not super important, but worth mentioning. Fallen Susan, Earth Expedition DPS, and we also did manage to use him in Abyssal Euphine Hall of Trials last time, though we'll see whether or not that remains. And also, he has a couple of other alternatives that end up being a bit more consistent than him. He's really just for pumping your Earth Expedition numbers. If you want your Earth Expedition to be the most consistent possible, you're probably going to need him, because Tenebria is quite significantly worse, I would say, than him. And then Charlotte is here, as I mentioned, mostly for Fire Rift. We don't know how much longer Fire Rift will be here, but it shouldn't be more than like a few months, I think. Because that is something to factor in. If you have Robin, there's no need for Charlotte, really. I think it's if you don't have Robin, Charlotte is really nice. Though Carrot did also get buffed, which should help with the one-shot consistency for teams that are using Mercedes instead of Charlotte. And we also have Vildred here, who is just a speed imprint. I think if you like are cleaving and you require Vildred speed imprints, you should know what you're doing. I just have him here. And then once again, these are the free units. Please do not pick these. But that is it for the hero selector, and I'll see you guys next time.